Hello everybody, welcome to the History Made Awesome podcast, episode 14. We've been gone for a little bit while. It'll be about a week or so. It's currently Friday, the 26th of January. And we're back again with Ben. Ben, how has time been off for you, or between the last podcast? What's been going on?
Things have been good. Just, doing school, getting readjusted, doing clubs, all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Coolio. Myself, I've been doing pretty well. Starting off, getting used to this schedule, pretty much. Because right now I only have one class, and
That's right.
I only have one class, so I only go to school like 2 days out of the week, and the last 3 days, or the 3 days within the week, I am at home. So it feels really weird, but like for myself and the way in which I kind of keep a schedule for doing research and things of that nature, I don't really feel like I have a Saturday, to a certain extent. Like, because I'm always, even if it was a Saturday, I'd still be like doing work. So it's like I get up like at 9 o'clock or whatever, and then I like pretty much start doing homework like at 10, like up till maybe like late in the night, pretty much.
Get up at 9?
Yeah, in the morning.
Didn't you start at like 4?
Yeah, no. So
hit the
like
gym and stuff?
that was when I was at school. That was when I was actually staying at school, and because
that's when I was protected.
No. So that was mainly because if I want to hit the squat rack, like at a decent time, like I couldn't hit the squat rack at 8. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't work out at 8. I have to, because it'd be busy because everyone else is doing the same thing pretty much. So if I want to get like a decent workout where I know like I'm pretty much gonna get the squat rack or any other type of machine I want, I'm gonna get there at 4 o'clock in the morning. Plus, it was also like I want to get after it too. So now I get up at 9, but on days I go to school, I get up at 6. So I get about 5 hours of sleep during that time. So I kind of make it up like on those days that I'm off. But yeah, so I never really have like a Saturday of a weekend. It's pretty much like I'm always doing something like productive in terms of schoolwork. So getting used to that schedule has been kind of interesting and really cool. Trying to keep my discipline at least, because within that type of environment it's been kind of hard. But on those Tuesdays I only have like one class, so I pretty much get lots of schoolwork done on Tuesday and Thursday. I'm pretty much there till like 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock. So I get there at 8 or so, and I stay till like 7 o'clock at school. I only have one class during that time, and I just stay there doing schoolwork. So that's been good. And I also found out that I'm gonna have my what's it called, my research. I'm gonna present part of my research at least on the 23rd of February. And for myself on that part, I'm kind of like, it's not all done. I've only been actually writing for like January, and right now, I mean, the research is kind of already done. But the thing is when you're doing the actual writing your research, you actually have to go back and do a little bit more research, because there's like some holes that you didn't know about that you need. But that's more been about like right at this current point, because I'm doing biographies on 6 people, and then after I'm done doing those quick biographies and the reasons why they joined the French, or to fight against the French for that matter, those have been pretty easy. I've done all the research for that. It's just pretty much writing it up, little hits like spots here and there that I don't know about that person. And then I'm going to finish that part of the research by the end of this month, hopefully. The next part of the project will be a little bit more, it won't be a little bit more less straightforward. I don't really know how I'm going to do that part of the project. But so what I'm saying is that by the time I get to that date when I have to present, I'm not sure how much of that second part I'm going to have done. And that's kind of like the meat of my research, like the things I'm actually presenting as a new information, essentially, or at least my observations of it. So my plan for that is try to get at least, I don't know how I'm going to do, because it's basically the way in which the information I have on these people from these primary sources from other people, observations on these people from that time. It depends on the person, because they might have more information than other people. So I might just try to do like one person from one side, another person from another side, and like they're like the second part for those 2 people. So when I go and present my research, I'll have like, I might not be done, but this is what I've kind of seen for at least 2 of these people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And to say, I'm gonna probably go on from there.
So you feel pretty prepared for your presentation that you have to give, though?
I do.
Or do you know what you're gonna say?
I kind of do. It's just that second part. I don't really know how I'm gonna deal with it because like I know I'm gonna have at least one half done. So by the time I present, I will know I will have at least one half done. And I won't be edited, or I might have to go back and fix some things,
Hmm.
but it'll be done. So that'll be good. It'll just be interesting to see how I deal with that second part when it comes to research. But I think I'm a lot more ahead than other people within the group that I'm presenting with. Um,
Hmm.
Pretty much like the other cadre within the program essentially. I think I'm a
Okay.
lot more ahead than those people, or at least some of the people. So I think that makes me that'll be pretty good for myself. So that'll be exciting. Let me just work my ass off to pretty much get as much done, and then pretty much a week out from the presentation time, I will what's it called? I will start working on the actual presentation. And for the people who cannot go there, I'm gonna have one of my parents probably film presentation, or Ben, you might be going, so I'm gonna probably have you film, put the camera on there.
Okay.
So we'll see
I
how
can
we
do
do.
that.
Yeah, we'll see how we do that. I'm probably gonna trust you because I don't trust my dad. Because he's very. If you ever seen any of my highlight videos I've done for my soccer teams, they're pretty. If they're moving around the place and not capturing the image, you know it's filmed by my father. So um,
Okay.
we're gonna need someone responsible within that task. I might be doing a vlog too. I might be doing a vlog, but we'll see how it.
Like while you're presenting,
No, no, no. Like
just
before
hold
and
the camera
after.
at an angle.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I don't know. I probably will be too focused or something like that. But yeah. So that should be exciting. Having a couple other friends come out, hopefully they come check it out. Um, but yeah, it's kind of cool because like for myself, like I think everyone when you're doing research, you're kind of like in that mode where like you're kind of the expert on that one thing, and you kind of keep it to yourself in a certain sense because it's like your baby. You're working on this project, and to kind of like share at least a tidbit of what you're doing and like why you're spending so much time on a computer and tweeting out that you're doing research or whatever in one room, and you have
Okay.
like and you have like
Uh,
and you have like what like a huge stack of books or whatever that goes to my knees, probably about above my knees if you're to put it up. Um, it'll be kind of cool to share a little bit of that. So half excited, half like I'm not sure where I'm gonna be at by the time I get there. But it should be good. Um, yeah, that's pretty much what's going on with me. Just getting ready for those things. And I think we're ready to get into the rest of the podcast. So I was talking to Ben earlier before we got on, and I think we should have different segments. So we're gonna have a quote of the week, and I'm gonna tell you the historical significance of that quote, and then we'll have our top 10. So we'll have top 10s of different things. So that's kind of how we start our projects, start the podcast. And then at the end, the last articles we talk about, we'll kind of continue the same trend that we had from the last podcast. They'll kind of be articles that I think are add some historical like context to the certain discussions that are going on within either U.S. politics or in what's ever going on in the world. So here is the first quote. So the quote of the week is by Charles V, and in it he says, "I speak Spanish to God, Italian to women, French to men, and German to my horse." So Ben, you there?
I'm here.
Okay. What do you think about? Wait, what do you think? What's the wait? Why do you think Charles V is saying this? So, what do you think he is talking about, and what do you think the historical context is going on? Just if you can guess it.
Well, I mean, it sounds like he's giving like it's almost like the stereotypes of the time
Mm-hmm.
for each of those languages or cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what was it?
Um,
Okay,
I,
so Spanish for God. So it's probably just yeah.
yeah, go. You're good.
So it's probably just because the wait, Spanish? No, because Italian. I don't know. Maybe they were heavily religious at the time.
Okay.
I'm guessing Italian was never known for being like seductive.
Mm-hmm.
French, I'm not sure. That one's strange to
Mm-hmm.
me because French to men, I don't know. And German, I'm guessing because you said he was the emperor of Germany or of the First Reich.
Mm-hmm.
So probably just that's the commanding language. That's the language of power.
Okay. No, totally. Those are totally awesome deductions. So, but I think what he's saying here is that well, just give a little bit of historical context. So Charles V, he became the Holy Roman Emperor, I believe, a couple years after the Reconquista, and he was a Habsburg. So at that time, or when Charles V came to power, not only was he the Holy Roman Emperor, he was also he also had command of what's that state? It's in what's it called? It's used to be next to, if you play EU4, if you're France, there's a country next
Okay.
to it. I forget, it starts with a B, but he owns some like lands in
Burgundy.
Burgundy. There we go. So he owned a piece of Burgundy, which is like in parts of like Western France. No, Eastern France. Sorry.
Mhm.
He also owned parts of the Netherlands. He also owned Spain at the time as well.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if he owned Portugal. I'm not sure about that. And of course, as Holy Roman Emperor, you have lands in Italy as well. So what he is saying is that he's showing the amount of control and power that he has. So what he means by he speaks Spanish to God, like what it means is that he owns a piece of Spain. So he speaks Spanish to God. He speaks Italian to women, so it shows that he has lands in Italy. French to men, as an owner of parts of Burgundy, modern day France, he speaks French. And German to my horse, as a German as a Holy Roman Emperor, you speak German. And I think a part of it also could go to the those ideas. So I think like one of the good things you bring like Spanish to God, like you have the Spanish Inquisition, especially very much about the religion, all that good stuff. German very militaristic, especially a lot of like the German states, have a lot of like mercenaries in that nature. French
Mhm.
probably something like intellectual maybe. Italian maybe the language of love maybe, not sure, but I think a part of that goes in. So that's kind of the historical context of that quote. Just kind of start us off. Anything to add on to that, or would you like to move
Oh no,
on?
I just find it kind of interesting. I think it speaks a lot about the culture of the time.
Mm-hmm. Especially how it's very like fluid, how you can be like this very multicultural type of person as ruler. You know what I'm saying,
Mhm.
especially like France starts to become that language, especially as the Enlightenment kind of goes around the Baroque period. You start to see French being the thing, like English now. How if you speak English, you can pretty much be a very well versed person. You can pretty much move around the world and pretty much be seen as a higher, I guess, a
Yeah.
higher level.
So French was like the language of trade or diplomacy or something.
Yeah, especially around the 1700s,
Mm.
maybe into like the early 1800s. French became that language because it was the
Okay.
Enlightenment, and if you spoke French,
Wasn't Charles V like way before the 1700s though?
no. I'm just kind of saying that I'm
Oh, okay.
providing
That's
like
just when it hit
yeah,
its peak.
yeah. That what I'm saying is that like that's when like around the 1700s is when one language started to become more dominant than the others as a European language.
Gotcha.
That's what I'm saying because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's basically what I'm saying. Okay, so that was a cool little quote. So we're now getting to our top 10. So we have for this time our top 10 is from Frank Wilson. I wish I had the website for this. I'll probably put it up. I think it's unsolved.com. Um,
So
so we
mine
have
says Listiverse or
okay.
listserv.
I'm not sure what the website is, but I got it on Flipboard. So for the top, so I guess we'll get into our top 10. So basically,
Mhm.
burials. So I mean, burials as a sense I guess historians have kind of used burials as a sense to see how organized they are and kind of like, are they an organized society at least, or do they have some type of religious cultural practices,
Yeah.
essentially. And so I guess we'll get into it. So I guess the earliest burial with a purpose humans can be traced around 100,000 years to the caves of Mount Camel in Israel. It says the graves
I think it
of
says Carmel
Carmel. My bad. I was like Camel. That was an interesting name.
or
Uh,
Carmel rather.
yeah. It says the graves where several modern humans have been found. The bodies appear to have been buried with seashells, which must have come quite a distance from the ocean. It says the
Mm.
shells would have been unfit for use as food in a hot and unhygienic desert. It's more likely that, or I guess anthropologists consider that they were more likely used as jewels and as ritual offerings for the dead. And yeah, anything
That's
that
interesting.
and it says
Well,
that okay, go.
like it says, burials are very unique to humans.
Mm-hmm.
A cultural like move forward
Mm-hmm.
if humans start to spend the time and effort to bury someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it says, just to finish off the article, it says that it's possible that it was not modern Homo sapiens who were first to bury their dead with honors. It is said that Neanderthals may have placed their dead in the Pontyweed cave in Wales as long as 250,000 years ago. That's pretty crazy. And it's funny because like in terms like not like a historical example of like how they use burials. Like right now I'm taking Japanese history. It's more like ancient to medieval Japanese history, and so like one of the first things that the professor was talking about how long we can trace like organized religious civilization on the Japanese island, and it was by the use of burials we can kind of trace that like do they have like some type of cultural practices that they were practicing, and how long were they organized to kind of continue this idea. Don't tell me when the date was because that was like a long time ago. And I was very much not happy about that period of the class. It's getting a little bit better, which is
You moved on from talking about rocks, though.
yes, we've gone on. We're actually talking about the samurai now, or at least the early, or at least how they formed, which is pretty tight. Okay,
That's interesting.
So, yes, very interesting. I'll probably share that once I at least figure out what the hell's going on in that class. So the next one we have is the discovery of tin mines. So basically, we can use if we find out that they're making bronze, it kind of shows like another leap within their I guess is the technological leap within a culture or civilization. It says that unfortunately for humans of the Bronze Age, tin deposits were rather rare in Europe. Fortunately for civilizations, this created a consuming need for trade among different groups of people. And there's it says that there's been blah blah. And they're talking about mainly tin mines in general. It says that archaeological research around tin mines of. So it says that there are plenty of sources that refer to import of tin from distant places. One of the few tin deposits in Europe can be found in Cornwall, England, and Herodotus talks about, oh god, of the Cassaritis, or the Tin Islands, from where the Greeks imported their tin. This archaeological research around the tin mines of Cornwall show that they have been in use for thousands of years. Finds of goods imported from the Mediterranean shows that trade existed between these far-flung communities during the Bronze Age. Even in distant past, the world was not so isolated as we might have imagined. Globalization, maybe? Localized globalization?
Definitely.
Interesting.
Small-scale globalization? Where would that be?
Localization.
Localization. Not quite. Continentalization.
Continentalization.
Intercontinentalization.
Brilliant. So I guess we can move on to numero ocho, and it is Troy. So interesting enough, people have thought that Troy was just this like thing that this like you basically heard of the story of the Iliad and the Odyssey, fictional. But in 1871, what's his name? It says it was discovered by a man named Heinrich Schliemann. Hopefully that was spelled right. Just said right. And supposedly
Heinrich of Troy.
Heinrich of Troy. And supposedly he discovered the site, actual Troy, by looking at textual evidence from the epics by Homer and other ancient reminiscences to find the city. It also says the article also says that modern archaeologists find the methods of excavation used by Schliemann to be destructive. I think because he pretty much just like dug a hole in the ground and said, "I found it," and wasn't like, "We need to get our little brushes out and like dust this off nice and easily."
Brush the rock away.
But they also say, but it was like the only thing they could do at the time. Despite the lack of care in digging through the various layers of history, he discovered vast caches of treasure inside the mighty walls of the sea. But it is not for the gold he found that include. Basically, what it says is that the last article says that it's pretty much through archaeological evidence we can pretty much be able to discover that these things that were in folktales to have actually been real, which is pretty tight. Kind of like in the last time I had the podcast, we talked about the coin that was found in in Israel. How it actually kind of shows.
It wasn't a coin. It was
a stamp, I think.
Piece of clay.
Yeah, piece of clay. Yeah.
Whatever it was.
Yeah, but it also kind of showed that that for that story that the Bible is also telling a lot more truths that were actually going on at that time, which is pretty tight.
Yeah, it's
Um,
interesting to see like what little historical truths there are hidden inside of these ancient texts.
Definitely. The next one, number 7, we found polished stone tools. Says the earliest polished tools, most notably axes, were discovered in Japan, are thought to have been found 30,000 years ago. It also says that it says that says the enormous practical importance of these axes seem to have been turned them into a symbol of social prestige. Some have been found that are too large and heavy for a man to carry, suggesting that they were the first known objects created entirely for bragging rights of an owner. So basically, they're saying that it's another evolution within humans, basically meaning that they've already created things that are practical use. Now are they creating things for more of a like to show social prestige within a civilization or within a culture. It also kind of shows like the next elevation of that, which is pretty cool. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I would you if you're back in that time, would you be that person like? I don't know if I would try to create like jewelry or something like that. You know what I'm saying? I feel like I'm more like a practical person. Like, why am I gonna spend extra time to show that I'm this prestigious person?
Because then you get more things and people respect you more.
Good point.
And you survive longer because people respect you more.
Good point. But I think also it also kind of shows within an evolution within the culture itself. You know what I'm saying? The fact that now social prestige is something that's important for survival. You know, maybe to get mates or to get more wealth in a certain, or to get more resources to continue on living. Maybe. I think also that's another aspect of it too, which you kind of brought up as well. Let's move on to the next one. Interesting. I've never heard of these documents, but it's called the Vindolanda documents. It says, I guess these were documents that were found near Hadrian's Wall, and I guess a lot of debates still rages depending on what was the function of the wall. Either was it for defense or as like a trade barrier of sorts. So these documents themselves were actually says those who lived on the wall used thin sheets of wood to write on, as papyrus was far too expensive to import from the southern provinces. Interesting. It says the tablets contain not the grand inscriptions of the emperor, but simple letters between soldiers and their wives. Interesting enough, it says one soldier, for example, wrote. This is one soldier, for example, in a tablet, but probably not sent to the Emperor Hadrian, writes, "As befits an honest man, I implore your majesty not to allow me, an innocent man, to have been beaten with rods. These writings allow us a unique view into the life of a common soldier at the time in the Roman Empire." Interesting. That's really tight.
When I read that, I was like, I'm not sure what view I'm getting of their life. Why would he be beaten with rods? Who is he imploring to not have beaten?
I think
when is this supposed to have taken place again, or like when are these from?
They must have been like around 280 probably, because Hadrian. Yeah, 200, like around 380, because I think the Roman Empire fell around the 580, I think, or 480. So about 280 around that time. Ad Domina, I think that's what 80 stands for. I don't know what Latin is for, but it's cool. Well, two things I kind of find interesting from this is that the fact that papyrus was seen as something as like an expensive luxury item. So I'm thinking that if you had papyrus, you were kind of seen in the upper echelons of society, maybe, because you can also buy the paper, and probably also, well, I'm thinking that a lot more people can write maybe during that time or not. I'm not sure about that, but the fact you can write on papyrus also shows the kind of social like elevation of your status, pretty much. So that's pretty interesting and neat. And also the fact that I think on your note, what does the beatings show? I think it kind of shows the fact of how they discipline their troops. The fact that you were beaten with rods is a pretty severe form of what's it called, of discipline, which is pretty interesting and neat. But yeah, that's pretty tight. Let me get to number 6. My computer. Let's go there. Do you have the next one on there, Ben? Try to get it right.
Yeah, it's the Oxyrhynchus papyri.
You want to read that one out for us, or give a little bit of synopsis?
Oh, sure, I can. Why'd you give me the hardest to pronounce one? Oh no, my computer's panicking. Okay. What is that? Oxyrhynchus? Oh my god, it's horrible. Okay. Was a city in the south of Egypt. There was nothing particularly noteworthy about the ancient city, and were it not for a quirk of the environment, it would be unlikely that anyone but a specialist in Egyptology would have heard of it today. But many things have been preserved in the dry desert sands of that place. When people were done with texts in the ancient city, they would throw them into the rubbish pits, in the same way that we would throw away newspapers today. So consequently, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's been preserved because people would throw them all into this one giant pit. So much ancient literature has been found that its importance cannot be overstated. Vast numbers of texts are still being found. So many that archaeologists are using crowdsourcing to transcribe all of the fragments.
Wow.
And it actually gives a link if you want to help them transcribe things. Become an amateur Egyptologist.
That's tight. Interesting things I find from this. I think one of the things is the fact that like these little like these everyday things that we do, like throw trash away or put these things in our weird places to end up being like
or post on Instagram.
Or post on Instagram, for example, or Facebook, and
oh no.
They kind of like if they stay around for like such a long time and someone from the future discovers this, they're like, oh my goodness, like we have more knowledge, like this is what they believe or whatever. Like that's pretty crazy, right? Like throwing like recycling things and other things of this nature is pretty tight. An interesting note on that is the fact that I find that they would throw these things away in the trash cans or whatever, and then that's how we dig them up. Interesting enough, when I went into a pit essentially. Interesting note, I vlogged this, but when I went to the what was it called, the underground tours in Sacramento, California, a lot of the artifacts that they have and are were still preserved, they actually were found a lot of in toilets. Like they would throw
that's random.
Yeah, no, they would throw weird shit in toilets, and that's how they would find all these cards or dices or these random things.
Die.
Yeah. They would find them in toilets, and
so
I forget what the reason how they're so preserved. Probably because they're in the ground and they're protected. And I think the waste. I think it's the dirt. Yeah, it's basically they're not out in the open. They can't be. What's the word? They're not to the elements essentially in the air and all that stuff that can kind of degrade those types of artifacts.
Something like that.
Yeah, but I found that's pretty tight.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's awesome. That's cool. Number 4 on the list is the Library of. Oh God. Ashuba. Okay, I'm gonna get this one. Ashurbanipal. I got it. I'm gonna say I got it.
Ashurbanipal.
There we go. So the Library of Ashurbanipal was a library of Nivea, which was the oldest collection of translatable writings on the planet. Damn. And I guess it came from the civilizations on the Tigris and the Euphrates, and it's considered the first true civilization. To manage such a civilization, it was necessary for the kings of Mesopotamia to find a method of transmitting their orders and writings, their belongings. So I think these are written on clay tablets, pretty much. And it is thought that the writing originated as a system of it's called invoicing. Invoicing. There we go. It says within the library, the kings of Assyria can be found the evolution of writing. For those who seek personal connection to the past, there will be no more touching record than the Epic of Gilgamesh, the story of a man who, after the death of his friend, searches for the reason all men must die. Those clay tablets, though, you know what I'm saying? You gotta do what you gotta do, and pretty cool. Number 3 on the list. Remember 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered the Americas? Remember that, everyone? He was not the first European to actually have discovered the Americas.
Not by a lot.
Yes. Actually, it was the who was it?
Nordic.
It was Nordic. I'm trying to see if they gave me the name of the guy. Oh, so pretty much.
Leif Erikson.
I think I'm not sure. Is it?
I think so.
Oh.
That's why that's the name I know.
Okay, so but the most important thing is that supposedly the place that these, I guess they're Vikings pretty much, where they had
hmm
gone and stayed at in I think it was Greenland, right? That's where they went to.
Yeah,
Um,
well, I think they managed to island hop all the way to
it was
like the
Newfoundland.
very edge of Canada, didn't
It's
they?
yeah, Newfoundland. My bad. Yeah, it's like in that's in or Canada pretty much.
No,
Um,
very, very eastern Canada.
yeah. So the place that they stayed at was called Leon's Ox Meadows, which was the considered Viking settlement in the New World. Um,
Hmm.
It says, well, it was told from a poem that an Eric Saga is an Icelandic poem which tells of the founding of the settlement in Vinland, North America. And it was considered like other tales to be like a myth to be essentially. But
hmm
they actually found it. They actually discovered it. And it's an event that signaled a huge shift in the history of exploration. And we'll have more.
Yeah.
We'll have more like info on that too as we go. There's another article that we'll talk about after this.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's pretty tight.
Yeah.
Yep. Want to get this next one?
Sure. Give me a sec. My computer's being weird with the internet. Okay. Indus Valley.
Mhm.
Or did I skip it? Oh no, I did. Oh. But it's French. That's your specialty.
What are you on about?
La Honte ou
Oh
Meadow.
yeah.
Yeah. Is that what?
Yeah, I
Or
don't
did
know.
I? I
Number-
skipped one, didn't I?
We're on number
Or
2.
did I? Number 2?
Yes. Or should be.
Oh, that's the Viking one.
Oh, well, okay.
Oh,
Number 3
I'm
was.
sorry.
We're on number 2.
Okay. So this one's the Indus Valley,
Mhm.
which I didn't know all this about it. Apparently, that we didn't know about it. Says if a continent can be forgotten, then why not an entire civilization? The three most ancient civilizations all sprung up alongside rivers. The Nile and Mesopotamian civilizations were never forgotten. But a whole flourishing of human endeavor along the Indus River was lost until the 20th century.
Damn.
All along the Indus River, advanced cities were built. Signs of science, writing, and technology can be found in the ruins of the unearthed cities. Why the Indus Valley civilization failed is not known, but we can see from the archaeological digs that the cities were often destroyed by the rivers that had given them life. The art of the Indus Valley civilization is often thought to show a remarkable level of social equality. If this interpretation is true, if societies do not move smoothly from tyrannies to democracies over time, it has profound implications for historians.
Interesting. Interesting. So basically, what they're saying is that like, I guess there's some type of historical like, I guess process that I think a lot of historians kind of consider is the fact that like you have like these tyrannies or whatever, like monarchical civilizations or whatever, and then you have some type of form of democracy or some sort of it, and then you go back to like tyranny again,
Mhm.
and then
Okay.
you go to like some like basically some shit happens and you go to some form of democracy and you go back to like a tyranny or whatever. And I think the Romans probably provide a decent like the Romans and Greek, especially if we're going from like Greek and Roman history,
Kind of exemplify that model.
exemplify that model. But then again, you're kind of providing like a very Western view of history, because I'm not
Yeah.
sure if all kind of histories do that, because each place is unique and weird. So I find that part of the article kind of weird. Um, that's kind of what's it called, Eurocentric. That's a very Eurocentric point of view.
hmm
Um, but yeah,
Mm.
so interesting.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting that it's like we didn't know about the Indus Valley at all until what did it say, the 20th century, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But since we're obviously from the 21st century, I like learned about it and stuff. So it's weird to think sometimes that stuff was discovered fairly recently
I think also the
when it's
fact,
so ancient.
yeah, I think another part of that is the fact that I think if you look around, like maybe late, probably mid 1700s, going up
Mhm.
to like, I think it was only like the mid 1700s.
Mhm.
If I'm correct, we can probably go through like a records of when a lot of these discoveries were made,
but I think they were not made before the mid 1700s. And the reason why I think that's because a lot of Europeans were very much like they very much want to know about their past and like where they kind of stand within the world order. Like as in like where did our civilization come from and like what does it mean to be a Western civilization? You know essentially, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times they went on like, and I think especially picked up around like the late 19th century because if you look, for example, remember how Troy was discovered in the 1870s, pretty much.
Yeah.
It was like it was like this race to kind of see like, can we gather more treasure of our histories and see where we stand as Europeans, essentially, like find the history of Troy, find like all these weird discoveries, essentially. And I think that's kind of where it came from, and of course, as we kind of go forward in time, the reasons for justifying these excavations kind of changes. But I think it kind of spawned from that idea, and that's why we see a lot of these discoveries happen post 1700s. You know, when the Enlightenment thinkers start thinking about those types of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that kind of adds a little bit more evidence to it. And the last one, it's the never heard of this one, but it's called the Göbekli Tepe. It says that it has revolutionized the way archaeologists have seen the past. It says the site on a hill in Turkey is the oldest monumental human construction in the world. The site contains large upright stones and a complex carvings of animals. Some think it was built as many as 12,000 years ago. This would predate the time when simple villages were formed in the Near East. And yet some level of social organization would be needed to raise stones such as the one seen at Göbekli Tepe. The carving seen there may even be representative, making them the earliest known form of writing. So a lot of work still remains a lot of work remains to be done at the site, but it's clear that humans came together to form complex societies far earlier than we initially thought. Wow. 12,000 years ago. When was the time when that's past the time when is that before or after people from Asia, when we're talking about last time in the podcast, from Asia to
way after.
That was 25,000 years ago, right?
Yeah. I think 25,000 years ago was when the ice bridge went away. Something like that. Yeah, let's just say it was a couple dozen thousand years ago.
So that's like what? So 25,000 minus 12, that's like what? 13 years?
Yeah, about 13 years, and it was like a child grew. Yeah.
About
13,000 years.
Separated. That's pretty.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. Like, I mean, 30,000 years is still a long time. Don't get me wrong, but like, you know, it's. I wonder like how much does it extend beyond that? You know what I'm saying? If we're just coming that late, how much later does it go? You know what I'm saying? So that's pretty tight. I never heard of it.
Yeah, and it kind of looks like almost like it's incomplete, doesn't it? Like, okay, first of all, what do you think that animal is? It has 4 legs. It has a face.
It looks like a mantis. You're praying mantis.
It looks like a lizard, and there's like a giant claw coming behind it, like a giant claw. Maybe it's a rat, and they're attacking it with something.
I have to put a picture on the podcast to show whoever.
Yeah.
But it essentially looks like a standing like building essentially. Like there's like rocks around it, and it's like it looks like.
Yeah, but what's the little animal on there though? Like.
Doesn't
it look like there could be another piece that goes to the right of that piece?
It's quite possible.
To make that branch-looking thing like continue on.
Yeah, I don't know. That's really interesting. But I'm not sure. Well, hopefully archaeologists will tell us what is going on there.
Do you know how old the Easter Island heads are?
How old?
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Probably like, I would say 8,000 years. I'm not sure. My what's it called? My prehistory is not on. We can check the Easter. I'm gonna look it up right now.
Whoa. Okay, I tried to look up the age, and instead I found an article showing that they have bodies.
What?
I had heard about this. This was like fairly recent, like within the last 10 years, I think. that they discovered this, I think. I've never actually looked at pictures of it. Oh my god, they're like, each one's completely unique. That's crazy.
Well, according to Wikipedia,
And they're giant. Oh my god.
it says it was created by inhabitants during the 13th and 16th centuries.
Oh yeah, you're right. It says between 1100 and 1680. Well, that's even weirder.
80? 80 or BC?
I think AD, because it doesn't have anything after it.
That's crazy. Really?
Right? Yeah.
AD? I thought it was BC. Is it? Hold on. Is it? Everyone's like, why are they always going on these tangents of like looking up on? Yeah, it says
it's like it's like that time, when you find out that the Aztecs are a fairly recent empire.
It says the Polynesian people most likely. Oh, this is Wikipedia, so take it with a grain of salt. But according to Wikipedia, it says people most likely settled on Easter Island sometime between 700 and 1100 AD. That's crazy.
Dang, do you need to look at the picture of their bodies? It's crazy. They have bodies. It's so weird.
What the the Easter Island? I thought you thought they had remains or something. But yeah.
Oh no.
That's crazy.
Well, that would be interesting though. Maybe they actually are the remains of ancient people.
Aliens.
And there's a volcanic disaster, and they all were frozen.
Aliens, I tell you. Aliens.
Weird.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next article. Hope you guys enjoyed it. There's these next one are kind of funny. So if you guys want to laugh today, you guys are gonna get that laugh today. So we'll do the first article. This one's not a historical article, but interesting enough, I was on the history Flipboard site, and this came up. So I guess this was a 20th. Oh, so today at 2:15 p.m. So today, on the 26th of January, the Paris Zoo was evacuated after 52 baboons escaped enclosure. You could say there was some monkey business going on. I was waiting.
There certainly was.
I just wanted this article on this podcast just so I can make that joke.
I believe it. I honestly do believe you.
Good thing that no one was hurt. Pretty much, I guess they had escaped their closures from the Paris Zoological Park in southeastern outskirts of the French capital. They were able to shoot the baboons with basically make them go to sleep guns.
Make them go to sleep guns.
And this latest report suggests that
tranquilizer darts.
Here we go. This is the latest report suggests that all but four have been now returned to their enclosures after being caught in a net, according to.
Caught in a net.
That's what it says.
Okay, I don't. Did you play the original PlayStation when you were younger? Did you ever have that?
No, because Nintendo 64 was a lot better. But continue.
There's this game called Ape Escape.
I think I've
and the premise of the game is basically that it's like you run around and you're capturing monkeys and you have to catch them with a net. So I just picture people running around with these giant oversized nets, just catching them, and then the
big ass butterfly nets.
Literally, that's exactly what it was in the game.
Oh my God. The good thing was that no one was hurt, and yeah.
Giant monkeys can be freaking damaging.
Oh yes.
They are scary.
They will own you. They will absolutely rip you to pieces.
They are stronger than you, and their jaws are very, very strong. They will rip your arm off.
Okay, the next article that is kind of funny. I found this hilarious.
Okay.
You can actually visit an historical figure who had a beard that killed its owner.
Yeah, you didn't send me this article. All you sent me was the
title?
Mentioned it, I think. And what is this exactly?
I'll tell you the story then.
Alrighty.
So, there is a epitaph or a epitaph, basically like a engraving on.
Epitaph.
There we go. On the side of Saint Stephen's Church in the town of Bronnen am Inn. Okay. It's actually the place.
Wait, what?
It's a town on the Austrian-German border, and interestingly enough, that's the place where Adolf Hitler was born. Continuing forward. On this
You're saying
relief,
this beard was all Hitler's
yes,
thing. I see.
there on the stone
It all makes
relief, it shows a man with an unusually long beard stretching down past his feet. And if you were to watch it or see it at first glance, you would consider it to be like a funny, like a representation of something or not a real person. Interesting enough, it could be a fitting monument. It actually is a fitting monument to an important man who was killed by his own facial hair. So here's the story. So the likeness is that of Hans Steinerg, who was a 16th century town mayor of the town, who has since become somewhat of a folk figure. Much of his life and role as a leader has not survived centuries since his death, but his incredible beard, which is said to have been over 4.5 feet long, still is an important part of the town's cultural memory. So here's the story. So Steiner was a popular mayor, serving multiple terms, but in 1567 he met his end. On September 28th of that year, there was a large fire in the town that caused a general panic. Steiner usually kept his prodigious beard, hair rolled up and stuffed in his pockets, but during the commotion he was running around with it hanging free. In the midst of the chaos, he managed to step on his own beard, sending him tumbling down a flight of stairs and breaking his own neck, and was killed by his own beard. Says that the full body illustration of the church shows it shows that the beard was really long on the relief.
I bet.
Interesting enough, though, this is a really interesting point. Tucked away in the local district museum in the town's, there is an interesting artifact. There is a strand of the 450-year-old beard of Steinberg. So they've actually kept his beard. After his death, Steinberg was honored with the aforementioned epithet, but that's not all. At least the years of work it must have taken for him to grow his beard, but he lost. The long length of the facial hair was cut off and preserved, separately becoming an important town heirloom.
That's something kind of morbid about that, but I'm assuming they had the best intentions behind it.
Trying to see. I'm trying to see. Yeah. So yeah, basically, I think the moral of the story is to make sure your beard doesn't get
trim
too
your
long. Trim
well,
your
I mean,
beard.
unless you're going for the world record, though. I mean.
Yes, but for everyone, for the regular people out there, trim your beard. That's the week's lesson today.
That's something you need to do too.
I do need.
Beard's always growing so long. It's crazy.
My beard is like, my hair is pretty not. I'm just like, I don't know. I'm kind of like at the don't care phase, but at the current point in time, I'm like at the point where I need to start caring. But yeah. So I think, let's see, we are currently at an hour, I believe.
Really?
Yeah. I think we should. Are we at an hour? I don't know when we start.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. We're about at we're about like at 45 minutes. Okay, cool. I think we should move into the more pressing issues. But before I do that, I'd like to little bit of a history, like how each each kind of area of knowledge has like their own little like discussions about their own like sphere of influence, essentially.
Yeah.
So there was one of these discussions about how history is changing, and so it was like a discussion panel of these historians, and so I think it was from like something about Indian history. I think that's what it was focusing on, but I think it also kind of spans out to their like my job as a historian or whatever. And so if I can kind of pull from this, one discussion is whose history is it anyway? And so one of the things that one of the panel people discussed was the fact that anyone with a good internet connection is an historian today.
It's true. I'm a very well-known historian now. So I have very fast internet.
His name was the man who brought us up was V. Suriam, who was an historian. I'm not sure what he studies that, but he says that yet he said being a historian by choice and profession is difficult, and both the other panelists backed up this observation. Another person brought up the fact that the way in which history brush aside some aspects of history and take up some others. So basically, how we choose what is history and what is not history, or what we decide to report on, what we decide not to report on.
Mhm.
Another person stated that in this context, that protectors of heritage sites need to be firm, or else there won't be any more heritage sites left. It says Anwar said that the development model too needs to change, particularly in cities facing a population influx. Basically saying that places where the cities are growing huge, that more care needs to be taken. And yeah, interesting enough. So I'd like to kind of speak on what we considered history and what is not history. Oh, actually, no. The fact that anybody with a good internet connection could be an historian today. That's a very interesting topic within history, because the fact that, as to be like an historian, like a historian within quotation marks, like you need to like work at like a research or a research-based university or a university in general, or you need to work for like a museum of some sorts, or some type of like what's it called, like a non-profit organization that does history or research, anything of that matter. But the fact that like a lot of popular books, like the book I have right now is called I'm probably gonna do a book review on it, but the book I'm reading right now, what's it called, Lawrence in Arabia, was not actually like those. There's a lot of popular books, like history books, that are actually not written by people with PhDs or like who can consider them historians. Like a lot of them are like journalists or former journalists, or people who can just go through archives and just do the same things that historians do. And a lot of historians who like write like a lot of history books, or a lot of books that like historians would read, or not a lot, like don't make it to the popular like audience essentially. Like they don't gain a lot more recognition. It's like a lot of these books are the books that we read, we consider interesting enough, are actually written by non-historians or people not with PhDs.
Okay.
That's one interesting little note going around, and I'm not sure like why would that be the case. I'm thinking that maybe I've heard a couple of things. So one of the things being that like a lot of people do biographies on people, like a biography of this person, a biography on that person, and doing a biography within within history, or like within our field, is like something that's kind of simple and easy. Like there's not much like emphasis, like there's not much being like new being produced essentially. That's one thing. And like there's a lot of popular media on that. But I'm thinking that probably one of the reasons why there's that disconnect is probably because trained historians, probably their work is a lot more complex, and you have to have a lot more historical context into what is going on. So what I'm saying is that like they kind of make history for other historians essentially. You know what I'm saying? Because I think what they're trying to do is like they create this argument for like other historians within that field to kind of like discuss, like, are they providing good evidence, like how is their research going, like are they asking interesting questions, how is their like it's very deep, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like what I'm doing right now, I'm not sure if someone would find that interesting, like a regular person. I don't know. Hopefully a lot of people will find it interesting, but it like my research I'm doing right now is like very deep, like very like we're going very much deep into one person. Like one person might find that boring, but then once you start seeing the entire picture come up, you're like, oh, okay, this is why I have to know these details or whatever. Or like, why would you need to know enlightened despotism, or the definition of enlightened despotism, and like how it defines Spanish liberalism going forward? You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure if someone who with a like someone
Yeah.
like a normal person would like find that interesting or whatever. So that's really interesting on that point. But the fact that
what's interesting, science is having some similar issues where it's, there's things being discovered every single day, but only the most interesting sounding things get like reported on.
Yeah.
And then it's usually like, oh, a journalist heard about it from a friend, and then he glanced at the actual publication and then decided to write an article on it.
Yeah.
And it's almost always horribly inaccurate, and it's making all these claims. It's like, this is going to change the entire world. Like within 2 years, we won't even need bodies anymore. We'll just be floating, conscious, something ridiculous like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, that's not at all what it said.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I think that's.
Yeah, popular media does like to kind of probably hurts every field imaginable just by trying to get the most views.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I found that like I think that's gonna get, I think that parallel between like people who are not not trained historians who write books and
Mm-hmm.
like people who are actually historians, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's gonna get even more worse with the internet. And interesting enough, this is kind of a funny, interesting quote where I was in a what's it called? I was in a sections class. It was like a discussion class, pretty much, my last quarter,
Okay. Yeah.
and we were talking a lot about like people who write like what's it called? People who like are foragers, or
Okay.
people who like are able to forge a good document and make it seem like it was like written in that time
Oh,
period.
forgers. Gotcha.
Yeah, that was like not actually the case or whatever. I think this is more the problem with like people who are like dealing with like 1500s and like before that, like forgers, for example. For like modern history, like what I deal with, not really as much. I don't know. It could be probably the same wherever it is. But what I'm trying to get to is basically like there was a story that was produced in around early 2000s or something like that,
Okay.
or late 90s. Um, but basically it was about Macedonia and about
Okay.
how I forget what the actual article was about. But essentially, it was providing the fact that Macedonia owned some piece of another country or whatever,
Okay.
and it was also stating the reason why they own this or why they should be put in the EU or something like that. Was the fact that they had owned their what's it called, their heritage to like Alexander the Great,
Okay.
and like how Alexander the Great had done all these things for Macedonia, and like we should own this piece
Hmm.
of park because Alexander the Great did this, and that, or whatever. Um,
Okay.
but the interesting note is that like a lot of like this is something that was produced on the internet and basically saying that like this is like the history of Macedonia, like this and that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And this is someone, again, anyone with the internet can be considered a historian now. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny because like if a lot of historians who worked on that period, the professor showed like an email of like different historians talking back and forth. Like trained historians can now find a lot of inaccuracies within this, like the fact they're using modern like descriptions of geography or like different things like that, or like they don't know of like how could like these people communicate with each other, or these huge ass inaccuracies that only like a trained
Mm-hmm.
historian within that period would know and understand.
Yeah.
And pretty much like everyone's like, yeah, we're not sure where this came from, but this totally doesn't like fit the evidence that we have about this period or whatever. But the fact that like with the
Mm.
internet, these misconceptions about the past can now be
Can flourish
can flourish
quite
now
easily.
quite easily now. And I think that's another article we can connect to later after we get to these other interesting points about history. Another one is the fact that the way in which you brush aside some aspects of history and take up some others. I think that also comes apart with that misconceptions too. And I also think that maybe history being used as a way to kind of like what's it called, to kind of like promote certain like issues we want to like continue, either good or negative.
Yeah.
I think especially like the like what's it called? Remember the clay tablet that was found in Israel?
Oh yeah, where they're just like that proves that the Jewish people should have Israel, and I was like, ooh, I wasn't expecting that to be in this article.
Yeah, and I think that's. But I mean, I think history as a platform has always been used for that. I think I think every ruler in the world has tried to use history as a means of like like pushing forward their demands or anything like that.
History or the suppression of it, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's only been like to now that more histories are being told at a more varied area.
Mm.
Especially, I, I,
You mean
I,
accurately or inaccurately?
I think more stories are being told. From what the accuracy point of view, that's kind of hard to be say because I don't know if it's kind of hard to say that any history is accurate because we have our own, like we come from our
Cannot
own.
know anything, can just assume it or
Well,
like
no,
guess at it.
I think it's the like not like I'm gonna say the guessing, but I think more
Infer.
like when you're reading a document, you're gonna basically, what's it called? You're gonna interpret it in your own way, and each
Okay.
person is kind of comes from their own backgrounds, comes from their own like cultures, and have their own like different things about them that
Biases.
make them themselves. Was it what were you say? Biases, kind of in a sense. So I don't know if it's kind of hard to say that every history is true.
Or
I
that
think
is true.
yeah, or anything is true for that matter, or at least is within the social sciences, for that matter. I think the best thing you kind of do as a historian is to kind of provide like a what's it called? Like show your evidence, show you where you get your evidence, and kind of saying this is where I got my information and this is how I've like interpreted it to the best of my ability. And I think that where the history comes through is where other people start coming in like saying, well, that's an interesting interpretation, but I can interpret it like this, or maybe like that different thing like that. But I think once people start coming together and we start to have more like agreements on one certain thing, I think that's where history starts like truer history starts to get boring from that aspect. But of course, not everyone can agree on a certain subject. But the fact you can come
Hmm.
together and like more we talk about, it, the more we can get like a certain sense of what is actually true history. So that's what I think on that. Um, um, but yeah, that's pretty cool. I think we should move to the next one. Speaking about misconceptions,
Hmm.
uh, there's a lot of misconceptions that have been made recent areas that I think this article likes to cover, and I like to get another one out right now.
Hmm.
Um, this article interesting enough. This is from the Guardian. I'll make sure on my last podcast on this podcast I'll try to put the sources for these articles so you guys can know where we got it from. And so we give these people credits for writing these articles. Um, the one we know is the fact that people think that Columbus was the first one to discover the Americas. Well, he wasn't. Interesting enough, I remember why they called the Americas but not Columbus. If I remember correctly, it was from a Portuguese man who went to Brazil
Okay. Uh-huh.
after it. If you can look it up for me, Ben, I think I forget the guy's name, but he was like that's where we got the Americas from. But essentially, um, how can we say anyone discovered the Americas when there was already humans on the or it says that I like this one. It says the people who should be considered the people who discovered the Americas should be the ancestors of the Native Americans.
Yeah.
Anyone right? Anyone? Any other answers? Writes over 10,000 years of human occupation out of history. Smacks an unthinking racism, ultra familiar from my 1950s childhood. So basically, Eurocentrism.
I feel like that's like a bit of an overreaction. It's that kind of thing where it's like don't contribute to maliciousness what could be contributed to um, incompetence. But it's people aren't saying that the Europeans discovered the continent or the fact that like the entire continent existed. It's like we discovered that humans were here. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of yeah. I feel like this person is trying to pick a fight with this.
I think another thing would be that, like, I think people who I think what I think he's trying to say is that basically it's wrong for us to say that like the Columbus discovered the Americas, right? Because that
Uh-huh.
isn't true. Because well, before we go for that, for like of course we found out that the Vikings were there before them.
Mm-hmm.
But what the article is trying to say is that people who really like, if we were to say who really discovered the Americas, as in discovered it, like as in there was no humans there and like someone discovered it, it would be the people who crossed the land bridge who discovered it. Essentially, those people would be the first people who discovered the
Most people
Americas.
say discovered the Americas. They don't mean like we're the first people to. Well, you broke up a lot right there. Anyway, I think when people say discovered the Americas, they're aware that there were already people here, and they don't think that the Europeans were the first humans to ever set foot in the Americas.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this person is purposely misinterpreting what that means in order to be upset about something and
What would you
try to
say?
feel superior to people.
What would you say? What would you say? What would you mean by discover? What do you mean by that? What would be your
Let's
stance
say
on
this, like okay, for example, like who was the first European to make contact with the Chinese? Like they were the ones who discovered the Chinese. They were the Europeans who discovered the Chinese. obviously the Chinese knew that the Chinese existed. But it's like the first European to go all the way across, like, basically halfway across the world from one edge of the continent to the other edge of technically a different continent, and found these other peoples. They discovered them. It's the same thing, like, we don't, that'd be like, oh, no human has ever discovered a plant because the plant already existed. It's like, well, yeah, but we didn't know it existed. When the Vikings first got to the Americas, they discovered that there were other peoples.
Mm-hmm.
Even when Columbus went to the Americas, he discovered for the vast majority of Europe that there were other peoples on another part of the world that no one in this entire half of the world knew existed.
I think what he's talking about is like when you put in this context of like this discourse, the context within it, like basically when you learn like in elementary school, right? Pretty much.
Yeah.
They tell you that Columbus discovered the Americas as like it was this new thing that they didn't like. Maybe of course they didn't know, right? They didn't know that it was there, but it wasn't like that. Like it was like this new discovery that like, oh my god, like it was like this first thing that like like it was like this connection. Oh, I'm seeing your point as I'm kind of arguing it pretty much.
Yeah, I mean they found people that no European other than a few very select few people up north had ever seen for tens of thousands of years. Mm-hmm. I would call that a discovery.
For them, I think it's a discovery for themselves. Not for
exactly. It's
race.
Absolutely. I mean, it was a major event.
Yeah.
No matter how you look at it.
But
it was a major turning point in history.
I think what the person trying to say is that the person who really discovered the Americas, as in like the humans discovering the Americas, it would technically have to be the people moving over the land bridge. I think that's what.
Yeah, but I feel like they're purposely misinterpreting the phrase "discover the Americas" in order to make the argument.
Maybe it's rediscover.
That would be a good one.
There we go.
Well, so there's like the second paragraph where they're like, it's not carbon dating, it's radiocarbon dating. I'm like, those are synonyms. I feel like this person is just trying to be so high and mighty, just above everyone else. He's like, the term radiocarbon dating dates back to the 40s. Carbon dating does not exist. I'm like, well, carbon dating is the shortened versions of radiocarbon dating because it's shorter, so it's easier to say it. I feel like they're trying to be so superior in the entire thing. And like I get their point where it's like, yeah, the Europeans were definitely not the first humans in the Americas by tens of thousands of years. but it was still an event and it still was a thing.
I agree. I agree with that point. I agree with both points. So here's another misconception that I think the wily misconception everyone has. The first people who took to the airs. It was not the Wright brothers.
Yeah, I legitimately did not know this until I read this article. So.
It says the first person, the true precedent for the Wright brothers was a Yorkshire man, Englishman, Sir George Harley. It's funny because as Wilbur Wright himself acknowledged in his writing, it just tells us. It says even the U.S. National Air and Space Museum in Washington now has a section about Harley and his achievements as the first father of aviation. It was his coachman whom he persuaded to fly in the first ever successful fixed-wing glider on his estate on, of course, a rich guy.
Can you imagine? It's he didn't even do the flight. He's like talking to the guy who drives him around with his horses. He's like, "Hey, can you get on this thing and kind of cliff for me? I promise it's safe."
I've done the science. I've done the science. No one else has done this before. It should be okay. I've done the math.
Like, you know about the guy the first guy who kind of invented, I can't remember if it was a parachute or more of a wingsuit, but he invented essentially a parachute. And he's like, I know it works. So he climbed to the top of the Eiffel Tower and jumped off of it.
Really?
And it didn't work.
Oh.
So maybe this happened. No, this definitely happened before that. But still, it's, testing your own invention is not always a good idea.
No. Don't let the genius test yourself. Um, yeah. So I hope you guys learned something. Well,
Well, it's
America.
interesting. I've even been to that Air and Space Museum, the specific one that it mentions, and I don't remember seeing that. Oh man,
Cool.
that's
Okay.
crazy. Yeah.
So for these next two articles, I think we're gonna go more towards. I guess these articles kind of connect to current issues that are going on in the world. Um, so the first two, one of them will kind of connect to. The first one we'll connect to is kind of like the women's march that happened on Saturday. Women trying to feel them. Women who believe that they're not being like represented well, or the fact that they're not having the same amount of like rights or responsibilities that men do in our current modern civilization or current civilization. Another one is ties to immigration. How I guess basically like DACA and all this the fight that's going on right now, especially with the shutdown that happened on last
Hmm.
Friday, and just ended on Monday, and that fight's still going on. So we'll get into the first article, and let's open it up. So um, there's, I guess, like, how can I start this article? How can I start this discussion?
Hmm.
So throughout lots of periods of history, maybe up to the mid 20th century, um, it was considered by a lot of historians that women did not have a lot of impact on the world. It was a world run by men. It was a very what's the term for a male dominated society? I forget what the word is. Um,
Patriarchy.
yeah, very patriarchal.
Patriarchy.
Yeah, patriarchal society. But especially as the 21st century has gone along,
Hmm.
there's been a lot of more focus on history of women. So it's called feminist history in a sense. I'm looking to see
Okay.
what have women done in these patriarchal societies that have changed history. And surprisingly
Hmm.
enough, we found that women have had a lot of successes in maybe not being the forefront or like the person on like to making the change, but they've been very much influential within making those decisions. Um,
Hmm.
so for this article, it talks about it's a book by trying to see what the person is. It's a new book by it's an article that looks at a new book called Code Girls by Lisa Mundy, and it follows a bunch of a collection of women who worked for the U.S. Army and Navy, who collected intelligence on the Japanese, and also the Nazis as well.
Hmm.
And the story that, pretty much Liza, who I think she was a reporter or whatever. I think that's what her occupation was. I'm trying
Hmm.
to see what. Yeah, she was a New York Times bestselling author and a journalist with bylines in the article and the Washington Post. And I'm trying to see where she kind of got her. Oh, okay. So what happened is that she had happened upon a story while her husband was reading Robert Louis Benson's and Michael Warner's book on the Verona Project, a U.S. code-breaking unit focused on Russian intelligence during the World War II and the Cold War. And during this time, she had found that women were very much involved in the project.
Hmm.
So she decided that she wanted to read up more on this. So she went to the National Cryptological Museum and National Archives,
Hmm.
and found out that there was a lot more. Instead, she thought that she would be spending weeks in the archives. Instead, she spent months. And so she eventually would track
Damn.
down and interview 20 of the codebreakers themselves. Interesting enough that they were very much uh, tight-lipped about it and kept to their code of secrecy, especially when they believed that there was a saying going around when you're intelligence during that time that loose lips sink ships.
Hmm.
So they kept to their vow of secrecy even till then. Um, to kind of
Hmm.
cajole them into pretty much talking, the author just says that the NSA says it's okay for you to talk, and that many people have talked about you already. So to call it, so they kind of opened up about their things. So it's pretty interesting to like the fact. So pretty much the history around is that like intelligence gathering was kind of considered like this new. It was always been a thing, but like with code breaking, with transmissions going across cables and things of that nature, like the American government was already kind of considering that this is being an important tool. Funny enough, they couldn't figure out the fact that the Japanese were going to bomb Pearl Harbor, which
Yeah.
it could be like conspiracy itself that they knew but they didn't know, that they knew but they didn't say anything, or maybe they
Or it
just
could have just been like a really top secret mission and there just wasn't anything to intercept.
exactly. But it happened. So World War II begins, and a lot of men are needed for the front. So there is this role that needs to be filled, but men can't fill it. And another thing is that intelligence gathering at that time was considered to be something below men, essentially, like office work, essentially.
Hmm.
So they would go in to recruit lots of women who were going to be former teachers, because that was kind of considered like a high paying job for women at that time. And they recruited like a lot of people who were good at math and statistics and things of that nature. And a lot of these women were a part of that group, about 10,000 women who would join. And pretty much like their job was pretty much really hard, because basically I'm trying to see what some of the problems that they deal with. So a lot of times it was very hard because it talks about so they're just so they were kind of hired as computers, essentially.
Yeah.
So pretty much they were supposed to do, it says so code breaking was very difficult. It says that they had to deal with strings of nonsensical combinations of letters, seeking patterns in alphabetical chaos with codes. You have to be prepared to work for months and for years without end fail. The author writes. It says over the years, the teams learned tricks to crack into messages, like looking for coded refrain, begin message here, which sometimes marked the separate start of a scrambled message. The key was to discover the points of entry, which the codebreaker could then tug at, unraveling the rest of the message like as a sweater, it says.
Okay.
Trying to see, and it was also difficult because a lot of times they had to do these difficult things and like stare at these pieces of paper, and to know that if they failed and intelligence wrong, like you can pretty much get someone killed or have a ship sinked.
Yeah.
The author provides in this article like a one person, which was her name was a couple people, I think.
Who?
Genovina Jopton, famed cryptologist who was married to equally brilliant. Oh, okay, so one was Elizabeth Friedman. She was always a stellar student. She graduated summa cum laude from her hometown University of Buffalo. Upon graduation, she'd hoped to teach college math, but couldn't find any jobs in universities. And she got a job at breaking Japanese code, essentially. Trying to see what else is interesting. So yeah, but it says that all the work was not all smooth sailing. They were shoved into crowded office buildings in the heat of summer, so the job was physically demanding. Everyone was sweating. Their dresses were plastered to their arms. It was also emotionally draining. They were aware that if they made a mistake, someone might die.
Have you ever seen The Imitation Game?
Yeah, that's basically. They also in the article also talks about like how women were also employed within that job as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Well, I mean, on that team there was only one woman.
But women were involved within the they were involved,
the other parts.
Yeah,
but there was like that main team, like the one that Alan Turing was head of. His main team, there was like. Actually, how many of them were there? Were like 5 or 6, and there was one woman. But still, I mean, she played a really big part of it.
And interesting to note, because in the beginning of the article, it talks about how the first person to know that the Second World War was to end was a woman.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And actually, the way in which she found out was that there was a diplomat sent from. There was a diplomatic cable sent from Japan to Sweden, Switzerland, that they were looking to perform a surrender. And a woman had broken that code, knowing that the Second World War was going to end. And it was also cool because within within these code breakers, they can kind of find out how the war's going essentially by reading these cables for Japan to see like are they running low supplies, how's morale, and where their troops are being sent, like how the war's kind of going. So they kind of kept the pulse of the war. Like they actually knew how the war was going, if they were winning or losing. And the fact that it was women who had like the power to know all these things, and the author kind of brings it into a kind of like a modern sense. It says that it says though the herons of code girls were trailblazers in math and statistics and technology, fields that to this day were often unwelcoming to women. Their careers were due in part to the assumption that the work was beneath that of men. And she says it's the exact same reductive stereotypes you see in the Google memo. In that Google memo, I guess it says the note written by former Google engineer James Durham.
Yeah, that was a big thing when that happened.
It says that he writes that the reason for underrepresentation of women in tech is the result of biology, not discrimination. He sees an innate belief that men are the geniuses and women are the congenial people who do the boring work. See, and then she hopes her book will chip away the damaging narrative demonstrating how vital diversity is for problem-solving. Such diversity was common during the war. Women and men tackled each puzzle together. The results are proof, Money said. Okay. So Ben, what's your kind of thoughts on that article we just read?
On the one about women decoding, I think it's very interesting. Yeah, I feel like diversity of any kind will usually help a field, of any field really. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like no matter what, it's just if you get different perspectives on things, you'll end up coming up with unique solutions to stuff.
And I like the fact that continue.
I was just saying, and I think this sort of is a good example of that.
Yeah, and I also like the fact that a lot of people think that like the reason why a lot of women are not doing science or engineering jobs is because they're not up to it or whatever. Or they don't want these jobs or something like that. It kind of shows that like that's not true, and by using history, we can kind of see that that's not the case, pretty much.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think that. Sorry, let me get the piece of my protein bar now.
Piece of what is it?
I'm having protein bar because I'm super hungry right now. Like I think it's also kind of good to see that women do have something awesome to provide, not only just like what they do for us in terms of growing our race pretty much, but the fact that they're also like human beings who have awesome minds who can do these amazing things that also men can do as well. Maybe not like I want to go too far. I think there's some physical things that maybe men are a lot better at than maybe women.
Yeah.
But that's I think that's more biology. But not to say that some women can't do it. I think that's not improper. That's not improper to say. But I think that for a lot of things, especially with like a lot of jobs we have now, I can say a lot women and men can do it, and I think we should try to get them more included within our society and put in more leadership roles because I think they can. The more people we have in those roles, I think the better we're just going to be as a civilization, as not a civilization, but as a society and things of that nature too.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like just because of the way that our minds are set up, just biologically, there's certain things that women are able to just process better, and there's certain things that men are just able to process better in general, but not always. As for how that, just a sec. I think there's just there are just some things that men or women are just naturally better at, but I don't feel like that's a good reason to make any field completely just one gender of people.
Definitely. So that's cool. I think that's a good message. Is that don't matter what sex or what like what level society thinks you're at. If you just work hard, just try to prove to everyone you can do it, you can pretty much do anything, make anything happen. So awesome's up there. So the next one we're talking about is the fact that immigration debates have always been tied to America's moment of crisis. Let's see how this one goes. So this is something that's really going on right now, especially within U.S. politics with the DACA and how to kind of deal with immigration or whatever.
Hmm.
And kind of the fights that are going on there. It's a very pertinent issue. And interesting enough, this is from Time Magazine, an opinion piece by David Kaiser. Blah blah blah. So basically, it says that pretty much that pretty much immigration debates have always gone around like times of like crisis moments in America.
Hmm.
So the article kind of responds to writings in the 1990s by William Strauss and Neil Howe show the nation's history could be viewed through the lens of an 80-year cycle. Each
Okay.
time punctuated by a great political crisis that created a new order: the American Revolution, Civil War, Depression, and Second World War. They also predicted correctly, as it turns out, that the nation would be in such a crisis by 2010 or 2015. Wow.
Interesting.
It says that arguments about immigration have always been parts of that cycle. Questions of who belongs in the African community is a hot one when crisis begins. In every great time of America, turmoil has been found new answers to the question of who gets to be American. So they provide several examples of this. In the era of the first crisis, the American Revolution saw conflicts over immigration. As early as 1751, an obscure Pennsylvania newspaper editor named Benjamin Franklin, it has an exclamation point, that's why it says, rallied against a flood of German immigrants when he says, why should the Palatine Boers, Germans,
Palpatine.
Palatine
Emperors.
Germans be suffered to swarm into our settlements, and by herding together to establishing their language and manners to exclusion of ours. Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens, who will surely be so numerous as to Germanize us instead of our Anglifying them, and will never adopt our language or customs any more than they can acquire our complexion? Damn, they didn't think they were white?
No, I mean, back then it was like, unless you were from South or Middle England, you weren't white.
It says, but when the revolution began, political conflicts moved into ethnic ones off stage. The minority that was driven out of the colonies when the war was over were Tories, supporters of George III, not ethnic minorities. The same holds true for the next great moment, crisis of the Civil War. Slavery, of course, emerged as the nation's leading political issue of the 1850s, but it was not its only one. Immigration, particularly from Ireland after the potato famine of the early 1840s, and Germany after the failed revolutions of 1848, had taken off in the new nation, it provoked a backlash. Some Americans of British descent hated and feared the new immigrants, and they formed a whole new political party. It's interesting, the American or Know Nothing Party. America First.
Sure.
Says to combat this, a list of its policy proposals had survived in the Duke University Library. It calls for the repeal of all naturalization laws, more stringent and effective immigration laws, war to hilt on political Romanism, that is Catholicism, and eternity enmity to all those who attempt to carry out the principles of a foreign church or state. Basically, America First. And American laws, American legislation, and death to all foreign influences, whether in high places or low. God damn. This is the know-nothings were strong enough to win many local elections and gain control of the state government of Massachusetts. A center of Irish immigration in 1854, but the party was being anti-slavery as well as anti-immigration, was largely absorbed in the Republican Party after 1856. But says for the new party, the spread of slavery rather than the growth of immigration was the main threat to the free laborers of the North. Wow, that's chilling.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Here we go. By the early 20th century, we have people writing from Eastern Europe or Southern Europe. As the New York Times recently noted, this led in 1924 to the passage of very restrictive immigration acts that brought this migration almost to a halt. So the act remained in force for almost 41 years, restricting immigration drastically and set up quotas that reflected
percentages of various national groups within populations in 1890. It says the nativist reflection also helped lead to the resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan in the South, much of the Wild West. It made it to the 1920s a very bad decade in history of race relations. Oh, Jesus, wow. Also closely closed the United States to refugees, such as fascinating came to power in Italy, and made it much more difficult for refugees from Nazis to reach the United States as well. The Great Depression made pretty much stopped even more immigration from coming in. Rewards came from when the crisis continued in the Second World War, which prompted a simulation in the same year. This is in the same way that Civil War. Oh, basically saying that so like pretty much after with the Civil War, how you had a lot of these immigrants also fight in the Civil War, like a lot of these immigrants. What happened is that a lot of these immigrants are assimilated within like American culture. Like a lot of Italians, Polish, and Jews, Black Americans who were drafted in the military along with others. These were then kind of assimilated within as being American essentially because they had pretty much died for the cause essentially. You know, this great conflict and this great crusade pretty much.
Mm.
It also shows that by 1965 the nation had granted full legal equality to Black Americans and was feeling inclusive enough to let immigration barriers down again. It says now, like in the 1840s, 50s, and 1890s, last decades have combined massive new immigration with political polarization, which includes Latin America, Asia, and the Middle East. This is bipartisan U.S. politically, including both Ronald Reagan, who signed the law giving. So basically, they said they tried to now give these people legal citizenship, especially in the 80s, when they signed laws giving legal status to millions of immigrants in 1986. And Bush had tried to pass Similar One as George W. Bush, who tried and failed to pass Similar One. It says it's saying that we're in this now shithole. How we think that we should close down borders and we should only let Americans in, or we should only have Americans first. That's cool. That's cool and creepy.
Yeah, it's interesting.
What do you make of that?
Of all of it?
Everything.
Well, I mean, you know, history comes in cycles. I feel like we found that in 100 different ways. And this is just one of those where it's like, you know, people get scared. They turn into whiny little babies, and then they just want to attack everyone.
I think it also kind of shows a part of that is like, I think what it also kind of shows with Donald Trump's kind of crusade and kind of like around those similar types of those ideas about what is American, and we find that what is American changes in definition.
Yeah.
As time goes on. So, in another point, there's not really such thing as American in a sense, to a certain degree. I'm not saying that like there's American qualities or whatever, but what is considered to be an American is kind of almost impossible to say if it even exists in a certain sense. Because because the definition of being American changes from time to time to time. So to say, we're Americans, we want like people who have American qualities, or we want, you know, America or something like that. It's kind of like, well, if you look at the history of it, you kind of find that it doesn't really exist. It just kind of changes as time goes on. So it's kind of almost, you kind of say that like it doesn't exist almost in a sense. America doesn't even exist to a certain extent.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
A little dramatic, but I get what you're saying.
Well, what would you say to that?
I agree with the general thing that you're saying. Yeah, it's kind of people, when this happens, it doesn't really come down to, I want people only that are American. What it really is like, I only want people who will believe exactly the same things that I believe. And it kind of seems like, well, actually, I'm not sure then. I don't know. I would have to like study up on this a bit, but I'm wondering if this usually comes from like the more conservative side, the more like, we need to maintain exactly who we are, what we are.
I think so.
But then,
to a degree.
Yeah, but it's like,
I think it goes beyond just conservative and liberal though. I think when we define ourselves as Americans, we have like this set idea of what it is to be an American. I don't know what that would be because I have a different perception of what America would be. But I think people have a general conception of what it is to be American, and I don't think a lot of people take this idea, what we just learned in this article, to be put into play. You know what I'm saying? About how this definition of American has changed so long. I mean, blacks, for example, were not considered to be Americans; they were considered to be property. You know?
Yeah.
And then after the abolition of slavery, after the Civil War, and then with the voting rights in the '60s, or getting them more powers, or making them more equal.
God, you just made me think of an alternate timeline where like slavery still exists and the slaves are marked with "Made in America."
Oh shit.
Ugh.
Oh god. Or Made in Africa. Fuck. Damn.
Oh man.
But seriously, no. I think that's a really cool article, and it kind of like shapes. I think it's a good way to kind of end the podcast. But like a good thing to think about, like what does it actually mean to be American?
I don't think there's actually really an answer to that. It's just kind of whatever. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway.
But yeah, so that's kind of all I got for tonight. We were on here for a good amount of time. Ben, anything you want to add to any of the discussions we're having, or anything else you're going to say?
No, I think that's all good. I think we kind of touched on everything at least a little bit.
Yeah.
Hope you guys enjoyed what we were talking about in our little ramblings. We're trying to get it, as we go on, we're trying to get a lot more organized in how we do these things. I think we're kind of finding some type of good trend for us. But yeah, hope you guys learned some awesome things. And if you have any questions, or you guys want to say that we're wrong or anything like that, which is totally okay for you to do, but it's good for you guys to know if we're never wrong. You can tweet us at History Made Awesome. And we also have an Instagram account. I'm probably gonna try posting on that more. It's at History Made Awesome on Instagram. And also you can comment on the YouTube channel and the video, and hit a like and share with all your friends, and try to grow this family a bit more. I'm gonna try my best to get more people on this podcast to kind of talk about their ideas. Hopefully, kind of freshen up a bit. We'll see how that goes. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the podcast, and we'll see you guys on next week. Hopefully, we're gonna probably do Fridays, and then hopefully come out on Sundays. So you might see this trend continue. But yeah, see you guys later. Goodbye.
Bye.
Good night.